All right, today we're diving into a story that starts with a sunken ship in the Sea of Azov. But what looks like just another maritime incident, well, it turns out it's this whole complex web of espionage, economic warfare, and a completely new kind of modern conflict. Let's get into it. Right away, this story just explodes with this really stark accusation from Vladimir Saldo, a Russian-installed official. I mean, there's no ambiguity here, right? He's not even hinting it could have been an accident. It was immediately framed as a deliberate terrorist attack. And that, right there, set the stage for everything else.
So when Russia immediately jumps to terrorist attack, you've got to ask yourself a question, and it's a big one. What was this ship really doing out there in such dangerous waters?
Okay, so let's break this down. We got to start with the cold, hard facts of the incident itself. What do we actually know for sure happened? So here's what we know. Sometime in early April 2026, a cargo ship goes down in the Sea of Azov. The crew, all of them Russian citizens, had to abandon ship. Now, 9 of them managed to get to shore in a lifeboat, but tragically, at least 1 person was killed and 2 others were missing. And this all went down just off the coast of the Russian-occupied part of Ukraine's Kherson Oblast.
Now, the ship we're talking about was a Volgo-Balt type, and it's actually pretty important to know what that is. These are basically workhorse ships designed way back in the Soviet era. They're built to be super versatile. Tough enough for the open sea near the coast, but also able to navigate inland rivers. Their main job is carrying bulk stuff, like, you guessed it, grain, and you're going to want to remember that detail.
Okay, so that's what happened. But now let's talk about the spin, because this was not treated like some unfortunate maritime accident. Nope, the narrative was set, and it was set fast.
Yeah, Russian state news officials, they were super quick to point the finger. The cause, they said, was a Ukrainian drone strike. They claimed the ship, which they said was carrying wheat, was deliberately targeted.
And this quote from Vladimir Saldo, wow, it really hammers the point home. He doesn't just blame Ukraine, he frames it as a pattern, a habit, and then he promises retaliation. And that language is so important here. Calling it a crime takes it out of the realm of military engagement and turns it into something else entirely.
So you might be thinking, wow, this attack must have come out of nowhere, right? A shocking escalation in a previously safe area? Well, not exactly. Let's zoom out a bit and look at the actual context here.
You know, this whole thing didn't just happen in a vacuum. The Sea of Azov and the entire Black Sea region had been considered high risk for commercial ships pretty much since the conflict kicked off. International maritime groups had been putting out warnings for years. Everybody knew how dangerous it was. And you can really see how things escalated over time. Right from the get-go in 2022, there were reports of commercial vessels getting hit. This led the U.S. Maritime Administration, or MARAD, to issue a very specific warning just a month before this sinking, telling ships to be extremely careful. So the sinking of the Volgo-Balt wasn't the start of the danger, it was the painful proof that the warnings were real.
And get this, the MARAD advisory was incredibly specific. I mean, look at the threats they listed. Projectiles, explosions, mines, and, yep, explicitly, drones and unmanned vehicles. So the very thing Russia claimed happened, a drone strike, was literally on the official warning list for any ship in that area.
Okay, and this is where the whole story takes a sharp turn. This is where the official narrative about a simple cargo ship just runs into a completely different story.
So we have to ask the question that Ukrainian intelligence was asking. Was this really just an innocent commercial vessel doing its thing? Or was it a part of something much, much bigger?
And right here, you can see the 2 completely different stories clashing. You've got the official Russian account, a civilian ship on a routine trip with some wheat. And then you have what Ukrainian intelligence was saying. This ship was part of a huge, systematic operation to transport stolen grain out of occupied territories.
Now, according to Ukrainian intelligence sources, this wasn't some one-off thing. They allege that these Volgo-Balt ships are a key piece of the logistics puzzle. Here's how they say it works. The ships turn off their public tracking systems, go dark, and move grain from occupied ports in Ukraine over to Russia. Then that grain gets mixed in with Russian grain and sold on the international market.
And look, this wasn't just some vague accusation they were throwing out there. Ukrainian Defense Intelligence had specifically named 4 other Volgo-Balt vessels that they claimed were doing this on the regular. That tells you they weren't just guessing, right? They were actively tracking this whole fleet.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, if you zoom out, this single sinking ship, it really opens up a window into a much broader and, frankly, a much more modern kind of war.
Think about it. If the Ukrainian claims are true,
then this attack wasn't just about sinking a ship. It was about choking off an economic supply chain, one that helps fuel the entire war effort. And it fits perfectly into this wider pattern of attacks that are moving way beyond the front lines to hit industrial and logistical targets.
And this fits right into a much bigger pattern. When you look at other reported attacks, we've seen strikes on oil terminals in Ust-Luga, on chemical plants in Taliati, on logistics warehouses in Taganrog. So when you look at it that way, the Volgo-Balt sinking doesn't look like an outlier at all. It's just another piece of a much larger economic puzzle.
So what does this all point to? It's a fundamental shift in how this conflict is being fought. The infrastructure that keeps a country's economy running is now being seen as part of its war machine. And that line between what's a purely civilian asset and what's militarily relevant, it's getting really, really blurry.
And that leaves us with this final and, honestly, really tough question. If a commercial ship is allegedly transporting stolen goods to help fund a war, does it lose its protected civilian status? There's definitely no easy answer here, but that question, it's at the very heart of this story and, maybe, the future of war itself.